Brilliant. So I'm going to be talking about, so namaste everyone and sawadika. I'm using the Thai greeting for namaste because the Thai people make me feel very proud to be Hindu. So if you haven't been to any of the temples while you're here, please go and see them because you will feel a real sense of why we're protecting our dharma. So before I talk about the project, I want to talk about the problem. So Dada here explained the urgency by which we've got to work. Sometimes the Kurukshetra of activism gets flooded with a lot of debate, a lot of ideological, tutu meme, Rahul said that, Modi said that, and we forget about what the problem is. So I'm going to talk about what the problem is. So can you skip that slide? Brilliant. Right. So who recognizes this building? Who's been to London? Put your hands up. Right, so that's the British Museum on the left, and that is room 33 in the British Museum, and that's the South Asia collection. And I'm saying South Asia in inverted commas because it's full of our Devatas, our Titankar Bhagwans, and our Buddhas. So it's a Dharmic Sangralaya with all of our deities, right? And this museum is one of many museums in all the Baltic countries, in New York, in Canberra, in Africa, but not Africa so much, in Australia. And it's full of our heritage, it's full of our sacred art and our sacred objects. In addition to the museums, we have countless private collections which have been funded, which have been full of our deities, which come from auctions. So a lot of the big auction houses are selling our murtis. Now, you might be thinking, this is great, all these Videshis, they love our murtis, they're loving our art, isn't it wonderful? Well, we have a problem. These murtis, like this Nataraj here, it's not like basmati rice in Bollywood. It wasn't meant for export. These murtis were created several hundred years ago, and they were created specifically for mandirs, for matas, for ashrams, and for private shrines. They were meant for puja, not to be on display in the museum. That Nataraj doesn't get an abhishekam, he doesn't get an annual utsavam, there is no unkut offered to him on Diwali. He's on display in a very unsanctimonious way. Now, you might be asking the question of how did our gods end up in these museums? Now, Upadhyay ji talked about colonialism, and colonialism is part to blame for why our murtis are in these museums. But one of the things I was very shocked to learn about is the plunder of our temples is going on today as we speak. There is a huge network of smugglers, of terrorists, of very sophisticated thieves who are finding ways of smuggling antiques out of various countries. And the most alarming thing that we need to be worried about is the thing we need to be really alarmed about is there's a huge demand for Indian art. So on this graph over here, if you can see the circle on the far right-hand corner, this shows the antiques imported into America between 2011 and 2016. Over half of the antiques that came into America during that time was from India. So there's a massive demand for our murtis, and everybody wants it, and the thieving and the stealing is going on right now. So I know our Sabapati told us to switch our phones off. I want you to switch your phones on, and if you want to learn more about the problem, this is a film that was produced by a young man called Nikhil Singh. It's a half-an-hour film, and it talks about the problem at hand of how our murtis are stolen. It talks about the very sophisticated means by which our murtis are being taken out of India. Please, please, please watch this film and share it. There's another reason why I want you to watch this film. It won a runner-up prize at a film festival. Film festivals are normally associated with leftists and communists and Marxists. This is a young man from our Hindu side who's going into film festivals, winning prizes. Please watch it. Now, let's talk about the India Pride Project. So the India Pride Project was started in 2014, and we do three things: research, advocacy, and narrative change. We're made up of volunteers who are located across the world. One of the reasons why I joined India Pride Project, so I learnt a lot about the issues which Ashwini-ji talked about. I felt very motivated to want to help Bharat and to help Sanatan Dharma, but I couldn't find any avenues to support. And I'm going to be a bit negative now, but when I talk to a lot of my elders in the UK and I say, look, uncle, we've got this problem with Ram Mandir, we've got this problem with our murtis, how can I help? So the conversation normally goes like this: Are beta, yes, there's a problem. Mughals did this, the British did that, Rahul Gandhi is doing this, Narendra Modi isn't doing that, and it's a broken loop of moaning and outrage. When you then try and have a conversation and go, uncle, what do we do now, right? So, apne shu kariye, because I speak Gujarati. And they're like, are evu che, kalyug che, shu kariye, I can't do anything. Mari paase samay nathi, I haven't got time. You know, let Narendra Modi, tu vyadi nahi kar, don't you worry, let the Indian government do it. That's not good enough for me, right? I've got a lot of energy in me and I want to do something. So, there's a lot of that going on, a lot of negativity. Now, fortunately, the India Pride Project gave me an avenue to contribute, and I was attracted to him because it's focused on action, and we really need to get into action. As our Sabhapati said, we haven't got time now, we have to act. So, please scan this QR code. There's a history of our project. Anurag Saxena leads our project. He will talk about the history of what we do. So, I want to talk a bit about what we do. So, there's research. So volunteers around the world, we take photos of various murtis that have been stolen. That research gets compiled up into a catalogue, it gets added to a catalogue. We then identify where our murtis have been stolen. And we do, just bear with me, we do advocacy and we do narrative change. So I'm going to talk a bit about the advocacy. Now the advocacy goes on in India, and it's about influencing the politicians in India to care about the fact that our murtis have been stolen. So in 2017, some bright spark in the Ministry of Cultural Affairs decided that they were going to propose a bill to allow the trade of our antiques, right? So to sell and buy antique murtis from India. That sent alarm bells with our volunteers, because we know that would have increased the demand and really made the problem worse. So Anurag, our volunteer, teamed up with lawyer Jai Sai Deepak, and they produced a very detailed report on why it's a problem for India to be trading antiques. Yeah, this report, this document, was sent to 6,000 MPs in the centre and at the state level. And before this went for debate in the Lok Sabha, it was withdrawn. Now, those of you who are familiar with Indian politics will know that 6,000 MPs, MLAs, that's not just the BJP, right? That's MPs from across the board. One of the things that our project is trying to do is to get over this ideological debate, right? All the problems we're dealing with, what Ashwini ji talked about, is not just Congress's problem or BJP's problem, it's about India's pride. And we are trying to make all the politicians listen to us, and fortunately they are listening. So next slide. So these are clippings from the Lok Sabha, where we've got various politicians from various parties, Congress, Telugu Desam Party, etc. They're all asking the government, when is the murti from my town, from my city, from my state coming home? So we must get out of this. This is BJP, this is Congress. It's all of us. We have to work together to restore our pride. Now, on the topic of bridging polarization and ideological divides, in the West, we have been spoken about by various media outlets, and these media outlets, some of them are very left-wing, some of them are right-wing, some of them are upper wing and niche wing and middle wing. It doesn't matter what wing they are. They've talked about us, and they've talked about us really positively. They've talked about our subject, and we want this to continue. We need to get away from polarization. We need to solve the problem. Now, I want to just move on to the next slide now. So, this was a little protest we did in London back in 2019, and this was a bit of an unusual protest. We didn't go and block the roads of Delhi. We took some little speech bubbles, and on those speech bubbles you got little cheeky phrases saying, you know, the British have stolen me, get me out of here. And we took pictures in the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum, superimposing these speech bubbles against the murtis, and this went viral. I was very, very cynical. I didn't think this would do anything. This went viral on Twitter. Loads of people resonated with this. And subsequently, the museum issued a tweet to talk about a murti of Harihara, right? This is Harihara, it's from this region, it's from this dynasty. And if you press play. When this went live, a lot of followers who previously followed our campaign trolled the British Museum, and they said to the British Museum, this is not right, you've stolen our murti, return our murti, what right do you have, etc., etc. The museum then had to issue a statement saying not everything was looted. So not everything was looted. Now this is a huge thing, because the museums previously have not talked about stolen heritage. We influenced that. That's the power of narrative building and when we all work together. Now, you might be thinking, what's all this got to do with Murthis coming home, right? We're talking on Twitter, we're influencing politicians. Pritesh is here to bring the Murthis back. Now, Murthis are returning. This is the good news. So, does anybody recognize this scene? Who recognizes the scene? Hat uncha karo. Okay, brilliant, right. That's Mata Annapurna from Kashi. She was stolen 100 years ago. She was identified by a volunteer in Canada, and this is her Punarastapana back in the sacred city of Kashi after 100 years, right? And Yogi Ji is doing the Stapana. Now, as much as I want to go into the British Museum and pick up that Natraj and take him back to Tamil Nadu, I can't do that because there's a level of political, diplomatic complexity, which means I can't, as a volunteer, just take the Murti back, right? In order to have the Murtis returned back to India, we need political will. This is a part of the puzzle that only politicians can help with. I can do research, I can do advocacy, narrative change, I can talk to the BBC, but to physically bring the Murtis back, we need politicians working with the politicians in the Western countries, having that collaborative discussion and then bringing our Murtis back. This is something we're seeing a lot of good results on. So next slide. This graph shows the Indian heritage, Murtis, various other bits that were returned back to India in the period between independence in 1947 and 2013. A mere 13 heritage objects were returned back in that time. It's absolutely abysmal, right? Right, go back, right. That number from 13 went up to 500 in the years between 2014 and 2019. Massive achievement. What's happened? What's happened is two things, right? Number one, Narendra Bhai Modi and his team have really stepped up India's presence. I'm in the West, I was born in the West, my family have been out of India for generations. For the first time in 3 generations, we feel really proud to be Indian because our government in Bharat is doing a lot of work on the diplomatic stage and they're raising the profile of Bharat, so that's number one. But the second thing that they're doing is in all the geopolitical conversations they're having, Narendra Modi and his team have put the issue of India's stolen heritage at the heart of those conversations. So you can see Narendra Bhai with Angela Merkel from Germany, from the Prime Minister of Australia, from Canada, with all of these heads of state. These heads of state are handing over our Murtis to the Prime Minister of India. In June or July, America promised that they're going to return about 100 Murtis. There's another conversation going on about a further 1,000 Murtis are going to be returned back. So we need to congratulate the Indian government. I hear a lot of negativity about the Indian government. We can criticize the government, we should criticize the government, but this is one thing we need to congratulate Narendra Modi's team on, because they're working together with the volunteers on a project. How long have I got? 4 more minutes? 2 more minutes, okay. I want to just wrap up with some learnings now. So I talked earlier on about negativity and we just keep talking, and our Sabhapatis talked about us moaning and we need to act. India Pride Project provides a model for all activist organizations to function on, and there are 3 things. There are 3 learnings I've taken out here, right? Number 1, let's get away from polarization, right? Our issues, Sanatan Dharma is bigger than any party, it's bigger than Congress, it's bigger than BJP, it's bigger than any Sanstha. So we need to work beyond ideological division and polarization and make everybody care about our issue, yeah? Number 2, and this message goes out to young people here now, we're very impatient. My generation wants to do everything in 5 minutes. Some of these problems have taken decades to build up, centuries. They're not going to change overnight. I, as an individual, cannot be a hero and get this Murti returned. Hundreds of volunteers working together over decades is what's going to solve the problem. So those Murtis that were returned is the result of all of our Karyakartas working together with the government, and all their incremental efforts have come together to bring the Murtis home, right? So we need to get rid of impatience. And the third thing is, there's a lot of hard work that goes on in the background that you don't see. So I'm just one person who's come to talk to you today. Behind me, there are hundreds of volunteers. It's a very lonely job that we do, and my other panelists here will tell you that. There's a lot of work that happens in the background. It can be quite boring. It's not glamorous. Sometimes nobody's going to give you a heart and a tika and say, well done, right? So we have to be prepared to work in the background, and we have to let go of any ego that I'm going to get sanman and man, because you're not going to, right? We're doing this as seva towards our dharma and towards our people. Namaste.